warm welcome to all of you who've joined us today. I want to start with some housekeeping details. So the structure of tonight's meeting, we have 6 brilliant speakers who have been asked to speak for no more than 7 minutes each. We may have difficulties with one of our speakers who has been held up due to some personal issues, but he may join us at Suresh Grover, so we may change the order around a little bit. Say a little bit about the chat and Q&A. Can you please use the chat and Q&A functions throughout to engage? There will be time for Q&A at the end, and we will be live tweeting, so right throughout. So use the hashtag KingsCross3. Please repost or quote tweet using this hashtag to amplify the points of this discussion. The event is due to last till 8. However, if there's interest and we want to continue the discussion, then we can carry on till 8:30. So I'll just start with some introductory remarks before introducing the first speaker. So, as you all know, we're here today to discuss the institutionalized racism and sexism that we continue to face, as demonstrated by the case of Salma Taha, our director, and her 2 friends, Divinia Riggin and Danae Thomas. It's hard to believe that we are here again. It feels like a Groundhog Day. I'm sure that none of the lineup of speakers can believe this either, as they have dedicated most of their lives to this fight. And it has been driving the anger and passion of those of you who have shown up outside Highbury Magistrates Court and reached out to us via social media. As activists, we need to believe in progress, but this moment represents a crushing of hope. It takes us right back to the 1980s. The only difference this time, I think, is a confidence inspired by the long struggle for our rights that we will triumph. And let's hope that that confidence is not misplaced. For SBS, this has been a long journey. For 40 years, for over 40 years, SBS has stood at the intersection of race, sex, and class, putting into practice an intersectionality for which we had no words until Kimberlé Crenshaw came along. This case has turned victims into perpetrators. Briefly, Salma and her friends were the victims of a racist attack by a white woman, which included abusive language like black bitches and slaves, pulling of hair, and a vicious bite on Salma's shoulder that needed medical treatment. However, the perpetrator has been let off with a caution, and Salma and her friends have been charged with common assault by beating, with 2 of them being charged with public order offenses, one of which was a racially aggravated public order offense against a British transport police officer. This is the Kafkaesque world of a racist society. Despite the fact that Black people have been living with a deeply discriminatory criminal justice system, despite or because of all the lengthy reports that have been produced, like the Casey report and the Stephen Lawrence inquiry over 30 years ago, and possibly because of the success of the Black Lives Matter movement, what we are seeing in the national narrative on racism is an attempt to depoliticize the concept of racism, to reduce it to prejudice, to fudge the power balance between perpetrator and victim, and to seek a fake equivalence of hurt and victimhood. Danae Thomas stands accused of racism for telling a white police officer that he would never understand her life as a Black woman. We do not even have the right to name our experience as racism without being accused of being racist. This reverse racism is an absurdity. Merely to call it out, to resist it, is seen as racism towards white people. There are a number of alarm bells raised by this case which should concern us all. The CPS asked for reporting restrictions to protect the police officers against public anger. At the hearing to deal with this, the CPS counsel accused us of mobilizing support through inflammatory social media posts and ratcheting up tension through our extensive presence outside the court. And he initially demanded that the defendants should be prevented from saying anything on social media, but backed down when our KC, Rajiv Menon, argued that the principle of open justice, enshrined since the 18th century, could only be set aside in terrorism and gangster-type cases when police officers may have to protect their identity. And although no cogent evidence was provided, the CPS also tried to allege that our protests caused disruption. This is the language of the new Policing Act. Fortunately, he was unable to persuade the judge. I want to link these botched attempts to the serious assault on our democratic rights which we have faced under this government and likely to face under Starmer's Labour, which affects all forms of activism. As feminists, we have not always paid sufficient attention to the wider democratic erosion taking place, nor joined the campaigns against it. Without wanting to appear paranoid, there is something in the targeting of SPS which feels pointed. The CPS has made much of our reputation and how we have used that profile in this campaign so far. To continue with what appears to be a weak case against the director of a leading anti-racist and anti-sexist organization seems to suggest a political motive to these proceedings. At the same hearing, the CPS demanded that the police officers give evidence behind screens, an unprecedented demand that was also dismissed by the judge. But think about what specter that sets up implicitly. The 3 Black women represent a level of aggression that would prevent police officers from giving their best evidence. This differential and divisive stereotyping of the violent African/Caribbean woman and the passive Asian woman is another issue that we need to confront and challenge in our collective struggle against racism. There are other continuities. The case reinforces the victim-blaming culture which we see across our work, when women facing violence are blamed and disbelieved by men, their families, and communities, so that the focus on perpetrators is blurred. Rape, for example, is a classic. This case is also part of a continuum of state racism as embodied by the harsh immigration agenda, which has been a key part of our work. On a daily basis, we deal with migrant women living under the radar, afraid of police action against their immigration status, and so continuing to live with violence and exploitation. All of our struggles are interlinked. We must not allow ourselves to see our struggles as separate. You will see from the speakers we have today the different facets of racism and sexism that their campaigns have targeted, and note the common face of our enemy. Thank you. I'm now going to call on Andrea Simon, who is the Executive Director at End Violence Against Women, which is a UK-wide coalition of more than 160 women's organizations, academics, and activists working to end all forms of violence against women and girls. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you. Thank you, and welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. So as you heard, I run the End Violence Against Women Coalition. It's one of the largest coalitions of organisations, researchers and activists working to end violence against women and girls in the UK. And we do have over 160 members. That includes 35 specialist organisations that are run by and for Black and minoritised women. What we try and do is campaign to improve both the policy and legislation related to violence against women and girls, but also to challenge and change the structural inequalities and wider cultural attitudes that underpin that abuse and violence. I want to start by adding my voice to those who've offered support and solidarity to my women's sector colleague, Selma, and her friends, Danai and Davinia. I was horrified when I heard about the abuse they were subjected to, and my horror quickly turned to anger and then to incredulity that a prosecution was then mounted against women who'd experienced a racist attack. I, of course, should not have been so shocked to see that play out, knowing as I do that the police are institutionally racist and sexist, and that Black people are underprotected, over-surveilled, and disproportionately criminalised in the UK. I would urge those of you joining the meeting today to take steps to support Southall Black Sisters' petition and to share that widely if you use social media. I've been asked to reflect on the particular issues that Black women face in relation to violence against women and girls. So just a trigger warning, I will be talking about those forms of violence and their prevalence. Do take care of yourselves. It's fine to step away from this meeting if you need to do so. So we know that gender-based violence and abuse is disturbingly prevalent in the UK. A woman is murdered every 3 days and takes her life in the context of abuse every 4 days. And these statistics, as commonly repeated as they are by people who work in our sector, should never fail to affect us. It is a violation of women and girls' human rights that too often shapes our entire life course from childhood through to adulthood, and for too many, it cuts life short altogether. For Black women and girls, the experience of violence and abuse is also horribly and painfully entangled with racism and the people and places we turn to, wider society at large, and discrimination that we receive from the statutory services that are supposed to protect us. Black women are both disproportionately impacted by forms of male perpetrated violence and are less likely to receive support or justice. We see figures from the Office for National Statistics that show Black and mixed race adults are statistically more likely to experience sexual assaults than white adults. At the same time, sexual assault against white rape victims is also 1.2 times more likely to result in a charge than for Black victims. Black and minoritized women who've been raped and sexually abused as children face higher levels of disbelief, commonly cannot access the specialist therapeutic support they need. And refugee and asylum-seeking women subjected to violence experience higher rates of homelessness, destitution, and repeat victimization as a direct result of state policies which explicitly exclude them from protection and ultimately sanction their abuse. No just society should hand survivors of domestic abuse and rape over to immigration enforcement authorities for seeking help. And yet we continue to see this unabated, even whilst we pass laws that are supposed to stop abuse. Just last month, new analysis showed that Black women in London face higher rates of femicide than any other group of women. This continued injustice is staggering. Black women know too well how often we fall outside of that prototype of the so-called perfect, blameless victim. It's too common an experience for Black women and girls to be disregarded, disbelieved, treated with suspicion rather than care, punished rather than supported, blamed and criminalised rather than protected, treated as aggressors and troublemakers. Even after the worst occurs, we see the erasure of Black women and girls from headlines in our press. These stereotypes and the racism at the root of this are entrenched across society and in its institutions. We see it from the media to the music industry, the education system, and of course, in policing. The racism embedded in these institutions has very real consequences in our day-to-day lives. The treatment of Selma and her friends speaks so loudly to this. And the fact that the victims of a racist attack are being pursued by the criminal justice agencies we are supposed to report into for protection encapsulates so painfully well the binds that Black women often find ourselves in. And we know this treatment is far from a one-off or isolated experience. I won't go into all the many examples of similarly Black women turn to services and turn to authorities and the services that are supposed to protect them. They do not get that protection. When it comes to women and the criminal justice system overall, we know that misogyny, myths and stereotypes about women, and whether we're credible victims, whether we're making up sexual assault and rape, has led to, at certain points, less than 2% of reported rapes resulting in prosecution, while 3/4 of domestic abuse cases that are recorded by the police are also just closed without charge. Racism and stereotypes around race also play a major role in whether a case is taken forward by prosecutors or not. We have seen this play out in our work time and time again. And then you see evidence of disparities in conviction rates when a victim is Black compared to when they are white. For Black women, racist stereotypes about that perfect victim play out in a way that means they are at a heightened risk of being dismissed and blamed for what's happened to them. For those that do report to the police, being pathologized as aggressive or angry, for example, results in their experiences of violence being negated. We know that for Black women experiencing domestic abuse, they are far less likely, they come into contact with the police, to be referred on for support to a specialist support service. I would highlight that there's important work that's been done by IMCAN and the Centre for Women's Justice here in a report on femicide and Black and minoritized women entitled Life or Death. This research found that although 71% of the women who died or were killed who did disclose abuse to agencies, almost all of those women were not receiving any support by a buy and force service. This underfunding of specialist buy and force services for Black and minoritized women is a life or death issue. In my work holding criminal justice system agencies to account, I found that even when there are accepted failings across the board, for example, a poor response to violence against women and girls and a low prosecution rate for rape, there's an additional uphill battle to get traction and action to address how that plays out for Black and other marginalised women. There's a total indifference and disinterest in exploring how and why these inequalities persist in terms of poorer outcomes. A clear example of this is the failure of agencies to even adhere to basic requirements under the Equality Act to capture disaggregated data on protected characteristics. What that means is when you see new projects and interventions being rolled out, we constantly have to ask, and what can you tell us about how this is accessed and experienced by Black women, along with other marginalised groups, migrant women, disabled and LGBT survivors? The most common answer is, we don't know. And the inference I have to take from that is we don't care. In parallel to this, we can look at the rollout of things like policing in our schools and colleges. The case of Child Q obviously drew public attention to what were long-standing concerns about the harmful consequences for Black and minoritized children and their right to education without the threat of being surveilled, harassed, violated and criminalised in what should be a place of safety. Reports such as that by the Runnymede Trust on policing in schools again raised serious questions about its potential detrimental impact on Black children. But again, when I'm asking the questions about what schools police are in, what they're doing and how they might be impacting children differently, I'm faced with the responses that we don't know, we don't have that data. If you won't even track what the impacts of your operations are on Black and minoritized women and children, we can't trust that you have any desire to serve us. And when new evidence does emerge about disproportionality, such as recent news that Black women face higher rates of femicide, you might think that would instigate a real moment for pause and reflection about what we might need to do differently to create safety and protection for all women. And yet the injustice simply rolls on. I'll just finish by saying that we know all of this has got to change if we're going to see any real accountability to Black women and to actually make ending violence against women and girls a reality. This is not an easy feat. It's not a quick win. We're in this for the long haul, but specialist organisations that are led by and for Black women have long set out a roadmap, and we have to impress the importance of listening to these organisations on any new government. We can't leave it just to Black and marginalised women to pick up this work alone. It's all of our responsibility to continue to call out this discrimination. But there are a few things that some of you listening to us today might be able to do now to support Selma and her friends. Share and sign the petition online. Perhaps also use this opportunity we have of an election. Talk to your MP candidates. Ask them what they're doing to ensure that vital specialist services like Southall Black Sisters have the funding they need to continue to support women and everyone who comes to them. Keep showing up for Black women. Attend the court dates. Keep this on the public and the media's agenda and support the organisations and the amazing activists that you're going to hear speaking to you today on this panel that are doing that work day in, day out. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. You've done my job for me in terms of next steps. I don't have to repeat all of that. Thank you very much. We were supposed to be joined by Suresh Grover, who has been held up. I'm still hoping he might be able to join us towards the end of the speakers, as it were. So I'm going to go straight now to Marai Larasi. Marai is a feminist advocate, community organizer, and consultant with 3 decades experience of working in social justice, much of which is focused on ending violence against Black and global majority women and girls. Thank you, Marai.
Ancestral greetings, everyone. I feel really sad and outraged that we have to be having this conversation. I'm also grateful that we have the opportunity to come together. Tonight I'm here as a member of Million Women Rise. We are a movement dedicated to ending violence against us. We are led by Black women for all women. And before I start, I want to preface my words with a little bit of reflection. When someone asked me to speak, I had a moment of hesitation because I'm not in the women's sector anymore. I very rarely do public speaking. My politics are likely not always aligned to much of the women's sector narratives. And much of my organizing work takes place in other movement spaces, somewhere on the edge. So I was nervous about coming here, worried about being the outlier whose views might be dismissed if they don't fit. But ultimately, the thing that brought me here on behalf of Million Women Rise is a deep solidarity to Selma Taha, Divinia Regan, Denai Thomas, Kamim Sola Olatunjoye, Black Girl Child Q, and the memory of Joy Gardner, Cynthia Jarrett, Sarah Reed, Cherry Gross, and all the Black girls and women whose lives and bodies are deemed disposable in this system of criminal injustice. I'm going to start there then because, and I will overlap with some of what Rahila said, some of what Andrea said, like, I think in many ways the overlaps themselves tell us something about what is happening to us, what is being done to us. We didn't suddenly arrive at a moment where Black women are not only not protected, but also are targeted by harm by the so-called systems of justice. European Enlightenment and its relationship to the European colonial project, which included the enslavement of millions of Africans, defined and inscribed the Black African body as violent, aggressive, incapable of feeling pain, dangerous, and subhuman. Racial science, eugenics, are not historical ideas that we've removed from the minds of those who are committed to and who happily benefit from white supremacist thinking. And we really need to hold that. These ideas shape our interactions with the so-called criminal justice system and the British state more widely. And we are witnessing the ways in which the right are organizing. And believe me, they don't agree on everything, except on their commitment toward destruction. You know, Sabrina Qureshi, who's the founder of Million Women Rise, keeps pointing us to the fact that Tommy Robinson and crew were out a couple of weeks ago. Like, what does that mean for Black women? What does this mean for us? So given that backdrop, and I'm hoping I won't need to use my 7 minutes so that we can make use of the Q&A. Just a few thoughts. State violence is violence against women and girls. The violence at the King's Cross 3, and I hate the fact that the sisters are now being named in this way. That violence, the violence that they're currently enduring, is a form of violence which is racialized and gendered. This is not only about intersectional failures, this is intersectional oppression, this is intersectional injustice. For many Black and other global majority disabled women who are institutionalized through the state system, the institutionalization is an extension of the carceral state. And I want to flag that because so often in our conversations, Black disabled women don't take, like, we in our work do not pay attention to the ways in which the state routinely harms and marginalizes Black disabled women. This too should be named as state violence. This too should be named as violence against women and girls. We cannot continue to ignore the struggles of Black disabled women. The ways in which Black and global majority women and children are treated within the immigration system is criminal. Where is the justice? The immigration detention is an extension of the carceral system, a system which targets us. Black people are not even, Black children are not even allowed to be related to as children. And I know Daniel's going to speak, about a child queue, but I also want to point out that when you can't be a child, when you're not allowed to be a girl child, the implications that has for who you are in your everyday experience, for who you are in school, for who you are in terms of moving through space. If you know that if you resist violence, actually this is a consequence, what does that mean in terms of when we talk about life chances? So how do we make sense of this in terms of our work to end the violence against us? And I speak tonight as a survivor, as an advocate and as an activist. I have never had faith in this system. And I think that says something. I've never had a moment where I thought that the legislative framework, it was equal to justice. I've never conflated the two things. And here I want to point to the work of people like Claire McGlynn and Nicole Westmoreland on kaleidoscopic justice, because I think that points to something in the need for us to demand change in the system while also not directing all of our energies towards the system. As Toni Morrison reminded us, the real function of racism is distraction. So what is ours to do? People sometimes tell me that the system is broken. The criminal justice system is not broken. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do: to brutalize, oppress, and surveil. And so our advocacy efforts or activism surely needs to be guided by radical logic where we can hold multiple truths. This thing that we're trying to change cannot be the place of our liberation. Our fight is on multiple fronts. So how can we, yes, make the system more harmful? How can we demand change? How can we build accountability? But that cannot be our end goal. I also want to speak to us. I want to speak to us in the sector, in the movements. Organizing is fraught with disagreement and we get stuck there. And like I said, the right don't agree on everything except how they feel about us. For years, Black African and African heritage women have called for our sector to name and attend to anti-Blackness. We have been silenced, we have been ignored, we've been minimized. How can we fight for justice out there when we can't have the difficult conversations between us? When the case of Black Girl Child Q broke, when it hit the press, some of us took to the streets. Yeah, I remember going up to Stoke Newington police station, like a few of us from Million Women Rights, and I was just like, I'm gonna go on my own with my placard if I need to, because my dad was held in there, my brother was held in there, my cousins. I was at Stoke Newington police station has formed, and I was like, this is too much. But it was painful to witness the lack of presence from the women's sector, the lack of noise from the women's sector. So I want to say this. I feel deep grief about the murder of George Floyd, but I wonder, why did we not take to the streets for Sarah Reid? Why did we not do that? Why did the life of that Black woman not matter enough for us to take to the streets and demand justice? The system will never free us. We have to engage with it right now, some of us less so. But the system will never free us. And if we are to build, as Sabrina Qureshi says, a movement of movement, we have to start making the connections. What is ours to do? Where are the spaces of coalition? I want to big up the work of organizations such as Forefront, No More Exclusions, organizations that are doing this work on a day-to-day basis, that we, if you like, the women's sector, the women's movement, need to be in deep relationship with. Because if we don't organize while they're organizing, we are missing something like that is deep in terms of what we need to shift in terms of our practice. If we are to win this, and I am confident that we will win, I'm confident in our victory because I come from Rasta tradition. I'm confident in our victory of good over evil. But for us to be able to do that, we need to become much more sophisticated in our organizing and in our willingness to build coalition. Thank you so much. Selma, Danai, Davinia, like I've said before, we've got you. We've got you. We are here.
Thank you very much for that, Marai. I'm just going to read a statement from Diane Abbott, So she says, "Thank you for coming today, and I'm sorry I cannot be with you. I simply wanted to offer a message of solidarity. We know how much more Black and brown women are the victims of violence. This is so prevalent. There is a danger it has become an accepted norm, just the way things are. The great work you do and have done over the decades is to say, no, enough, we do not accept it. To coin a great phrase, we are unwilling to accept the things we cannot change, so we must change the things we cannot accept. You have my support in all the work you do, and keep up the great work." So that's from Diane Abbott. I will then move on to Daniel Kebede. Daniel is a former primary school teacher who has undertaken casework negotiation as an NEU rep and officer since 2013. In 2023, he was elected NEU General Secretary. By the way, the full biogs of each of our speakers is up, has been, I think, put out on social media. So if you want to follow it from there, you can. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you very much, and a real privilege to be with you all this evening. Just firstly want to express deep solidarity from my union with Selma, Denai and Davinia. So I'm incredibly pleased to be here on that basis. I want to start actually talking about obviously the context in which our young people are growing up in. The criminalisation of Black people, as we all know, does not start at adulthood. It starts when we are young. And I want to talk firstly about what we need more of in terms of our schools. Our schools are under real pressure. They need more services in order to be able to fully and flexibly support young people. Our schools need more support to respond to and tackle the social challenges which our students face, challenges such as poverty, rising racism, social exclusion, far-right TikToks, Andrew Tate, and misogyny. Our schools need more access to mental health services, youth centres, safe local activities for teenagers. We need more sport on offer. We need to see Sure Start restored in our communities, for example. What our schools do not need is police in schools. Now, there are, of course, occasions when there are sudden and unexpected serious incidents and police need to be called. However, I reject, and my union reject, the police in schools approach as an appropriate agency to work proactively with schools. We need to think very critically about what police in schools achieves and the risk that it poses. So the Running Me Trust report last year in 2023 highlighted issues with the Safe School Officers Programme. It highlighted some of the following: that police officers were more likely to be based in schools of areas where there are higher numbers of pupils, where there's higher numbers of pupils eligible for free school meals, which also correlates with higher numbers of Black and minoritized students. School exclusions are linked to increased likelihood of later offending. There's a school to prison pipeline. And where there is an increase of police presence in schools, Black children feel stigmatized, less safe, and it negatively impacts on their well-being, their mental health, and their attainment. Now, there is a physical form of racialized surveillance of both young people and even teachers. If you have a police officer in school, they can become a logical extension of disciplinary powers. The full scope of police presence in schools is 43% greater than previous figures have suggested. So to be exact, there are 970 9 police officers that operate in UK schools from 45 police forces. There are plans to increase these school support officers by 7% across the UK, and we are really worried about this. We think there is a lack of evidence that police in schools improve staff or pupil safety, that Black students are over-policed and under-protected, as we saw in the case of child Q. It can lead to some real highly problematic consequences. I mean, the case of child Q was barbaric, and I'm not going to talk about that in the specifics because I am sure you are all very aware of it. But it does raise some serious concerns. It highlights an urgent question about the role and behaviour of police in schools, and obviously the unacceptable treatment of Black women and girls. This and other cases have highlighted the deeply concerning normalisation of police presence in schools as if they are a neutral agency, because the police are not a neutral agency. Now, we as a union have focused on, in the last 2 years, on the adultification of Black students, where teachers and other agencies treat students as older than they are. Now, we've focused on secondary aged girls specifically in response to child Q's experience. We want to see more reflective questioning and accountability for their highly racialized presence and the impact of having police officers in schools, particularly when excessive force is used, even within a school setting. Now, we want as a union to empower our members to think very deeply and holistically about safeguarding and about what professional judgments are based on, and the role of prejudice, stereotypes, and assumptions within referral processes and the response to challenging behaviour in schools. We believe in promoting a trauma-informed practice, and we offer access to trauma-informed thinking to our NEU leadership members in their CPD. Safeguarding duties and equality duties sit by side, and prevent needs to be seen in the round, with a duty to promote equality and to respond to inequality. Now, the NEU has an anti-racist framework designed to help teachers reflect on their attitudes and on the culture in their school and college. Now, we have advice on our website about Prevent. In it, we deter schools from just making referrals. We talk about the disproportionate referrals happening from Muslim students and the fear reported by Muslim staff. But I just want to go back to the adultification. We are making teachers aware of the phenomenon of adultification. Now, this is where adults obviously presume some children not to be innocent, immature, vulnerable, or in need of care, instead viewing them as calculating, culpable, intentional, criminal, and responsible. This is what happened to child Q. In the case of child Q, there was the allegation that she was in possession of drugs. Now, that should have been treated as a safeguarding concern in a school. If a child has drugs in school, and I think the allegation was that they were selling drugs, the question should be for any professional, who are they selling them those drugs for? Why are they in possession of drugs? It should not have been to have criminalized them and then to treat them, in which the police responded with absolute barbarity, took her away on her own, and you know the case. So we are working with, we want to see the government end the power of police to strip search children. In the rare and very essential, in the rare occasions that it's needed, it must be carried out by a trusted adult. The participation of police forces in the Safer School partnerships must end, and we want to see that withdrawn immediately. Their presence is disproportionately impacting Black and minoritized children and young people, and therefore fails to support a safe school environment. There must be greater investment and funding to local authorities and schools to provide appropriate levels of pastoral and mental health care. We need funding and investment to extend youth services provision to support and safeguard children in schools. We want to see the development of improved training around safeguarding responsibilities that emphasize that all children need to be protected. And we want to explore the use of equality impact statements to hold schools and other public bodies account for their negative impacts of behaviour and risk management policies. We want to consider mandatory anti-racism training for existing and training and trainee teaching staff. We want to see develop and provide education for all staff around racism that enables a deeper understanding of its historic and systemic nature so that teachers are better able to see and challenge it. We want to consider ways to improve school-family relationships, and we would like to join up as a union with activists and community groups for support and sharing knowledge and expertise, because we absolutely have to turn the tide, and we can only do that through a collective building and alliances together. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Daniel Kevede, very much. I think I'm hearing a common theme about collective action. I think that is really the key to trying to solve this problem, although we've been at it for 40 years and it can be very disheartening at times. Okay, thanks. Sukhdev Reel, can I ask you to join us now? Sukhdev is the founder of Justice for Ricky Reel and the author of Ricky Reel, Silence is Not an Option. She has been campaigning against institutional racism and advocating for police reform since 1997. Thanks, Sukhdev.
Thank you. Thank you for Southall Black Sisters for inviting me, and my support to Salma, Diana, and Davinia. Okay, Black and Asian women have been subjected to racism for years. Some too frightened to speak out due to not getting any support from the police or any other agencies. It is encouraging to see that we are now saying that we will confront racists and the institutions set out to deal with racism, but who fail to deliver justice to Black and Asian people. So William McPherson's conclusion was that Met was institutionally racist. Louis Casey's report on 21st of March 2023 said Met again found to be institutionally racist, sexist, homophobic, and in need of a radical form. My 26 years with the police force has shown me that nothing has changed. I have seen the same pattern that I saw in 1997, still here in 2024. I got involved with the police when my son, Ricky Reel, went missing in October 1997 in Kingston. Instead of getting support or compassion from the police, they told us that my son may have run away from home. As they said, Asian parents force their children to marry against their wishes. So a mother goes there to say, my son's missing, could you please file a report, start looking for him? But I was given this. Was told this. Then the police officer, who had been a police officer for 30 years, winked and said that my son may be gay or has run away with a girlfriend who's not accepted to the family. So from there on, that the same time we knew we were doomed. And this happened when my son was missing and I was pleading for him to file a report and find our son. They did not take any statements from us, but insulted us because we are a working class Asian family. They have never met me before or my family. Due to my color and ethnicity, and racism and stereotyping began from the first day on 14th of October, 1997, and has continued even today. When 7 days later, Ricky's body was found in the river, 2 police officers came into my house and told my children, the youngest being only 11 years old, and in their parents' absence, because I was out with my husband looking for Ricky, that they have found their brother's body at the bottom of the river. You can imagine the trauma that caused and has stayed with us. My daughter had an asthma attack and she couldn't breathe. She put her hands up in front of the police officers so they could go up to get her inhaler. But the 2 police officers stood in the room, start laughing and joking, and my daughter had to crawl on the stairs to get an inhaler. She could have died that day as well. I'm just highlighting the above to say how the police treat women of color. It is as if we don't matter, we don't exist, or we are not valued or are counted. I decided to fight to get justice and have been doing it for the last 26 years. We still haven't got justice, but we have managed to change many policies and procedures of the police force and have received quite a lot of awards from different agencies for our hard work. The policies that have changed other victims. Like one of the, I can remember it was Nicola Bully, where Ricky Reel's missing persons guidelines was applied. Because I refused to go away and continue to ask questions, bringing their mistakes out in the open, the special demonstration squad officers from the Met Police started to spy on us as early as 1998. We were told they had no resources to find Ricky's killers, but they decided to use these resources to spy on me and my family. We are co-participants in the undercover police inquiry and hope to give evidence in High Court in February next year. We were the first family to be given disclosure by the inquiry judge. We are waiting for more disclosure at any time. Because we kept on asking questions, not disappearing like they wanted us to do, the investigating officer contacted a national news journalist and wanted her to print his story and include photographs taken of Ricky during the post-mortem, where, unknown to us, he had removed the skin from Ricky's body. I think it was his revenge, as he was highly criticized for his non-existent investigation and loss of evidence. He resigned from his post to escape the disciplinary action. This report is kept secret since 1998. My MP, John McDonnell, raised these points of this in the House of Commons many times, and these comments have been included in the Hansard report. On the day the Casey report came out, my MP, John McDonnell, raised Ricky's case again at the same time in the House of Commons. And all of this information is on my Facebook under Sukhdev Rio. The question all of us are asking is why women like us keep on facing racism and have to fight for justice. It is our right, so we do not have to beg for it. It should be given to us without demanding it. I have been raising my voice, not to shout, but for those without a voice to be heard as well. I have met many people, have given them courage to ensure that they don't suffer in silence. My book titled Ricky Reel, Silence is Not an Option, which is there, tells the whole story. Please do read it. We want each and everyone who has faced injustice to come out and tell their story. And for all of us to support everyone, including these 3 lovely ladies. It is very lonely and upsetting to fight your own cause on your own, and it is important that their voices are heard and justice is given to everyone. I will also send a message that we will not tolerate racism from anyone. Women that believe in each other can survive anything. Women who believe in each other and support each other will always reach their goals. Each time a woman stands up for herself without knowing or claiming it, she stands up for each and every woman. I have been doing this for the last 26 years. I urge everyone to use a voice and use it. We all have a voice. All we have to do is learn how to use it so that racists and the organizations that deal with cases like us finally hear it, that we are not going away. We are here to stay. and we will continue to fight until our voices are heard and justice is given. We are not the ones who are going to run away or hide in the corners. We will stand outside and keep on demanding justice. So solidarity to all from Justice of Repeal campaign. Thank you.
Thank you, Sukhdev. Thank you for your persistence and your determination. It's a model for all of us. And I'm really delighted to see that Dr. Shola Mas Shugdamimu has joined us. She's running, I think she's got to go very quickly after she's spoken. So I'm really delighted you could join us. Shola is a New York attorney and solicitor of England and Wales, a political and women's rights activist, author of This Is Why I Resist, and founder of the Women in Leadership publication and She at Law Talks. Thank you very much, Shola.
Hello, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. It's wonderful to be here with you all, my brothers and sisters in solidarity. I've been so moved by what I've heard. I have to say, Sukhdev, honestly, thank you for your leadership. Thank you. Let me first of all start by saying that I think we all understand by now that the system is not broken. Can I get an amen on that? The system is not broken. The system is acting exactly as it's meant to act. People, let's not get confused, disillusioned with, oh my God, what justice is meant to look like. Because for the longest time, justice has been written and dictated by white supremacy. That is one of the reasons that explains, that's quite frankly, epitomizes the apathy and the racism and the misogynoir of the institutional racism we find with our police. They forget that they're there to protect and serve us too. Instead, we are the ones that are over-policed and under-protected. And it's for a reason, because that's exactly what the institution was created for. Was it created to protect and serve us? Heck no. And the reality here is that if we understand the purpose of the system, we must understand that the best way to end this systemic oppression and suppression is to confront it. And we must confront it with the truth. Just like Sukhdev was saying, and everyone else has said, you have to confront the problem, the system. And it is not enough, my brothers and sisters, it's not enough for us to cry. They pay no attention to our tears. If I cry, a Black woman's tears has no way, no near the kind of power that a white woman's tears have. No one's going to be paying attention to that. I could be shedding blood. My blood will make no difference to them. No, we have to use the exact same thing that they used to suppress us. We have to understand the legislation, the law. We have to understand all of the resources that they use and then use that to confront them. Yes, we must shout. We must shout on the streets. We must shout, in the workforce. We must shout wherever we are within our communities and outside our communities and on the media platforms. But it is not enough to shout. Your shouting must be articulate, eloquent, with facts, educated, so that they cannot shut us down with lies. When you hear about what happened to Selma and her friends, how in a society that claims to be progressive can 3 Black women be attacked, racially attacked, verbally and physically by a white person, and then they are the ones that get charged? They get charged. Think about that for a second. While the white woman, the perpetrator, walks away with a caution. I mean, as soon as I came to that understanding, I said, well, the system is working. The system is working. So every single time I hear, how do we end this racial discrimination? The police has had 30 years since the Macpherson report to do something about it. They've done jack all. Casey report comes along, reinforces what the Macpherson report says. They're still doing what? Jack all. And this is not a case of justice delayed is justice denied. People, they don't want to give us justice. So what we have to do is not ask for it. Heck, this is not even about demanding for it. We go and get it using the very same system, changing the system, the policies, just like Sukdev has been saying that through her work over a number of years. And I know I can just imagine how painful and lonely that must have been for her and her family. How incredibly lonely and heartbreaking. And sometimes people do not understand what we go through, what it takes to get up every single day, knowing fully well in whatever particular situation you're in, that sometimes you just feel lonely. And what you need is a community that embraces you, and a community that is Black, white, and brown. A community that truly wants progress. I mean, let me give you another example. The general election is coming up. Yes. When I say we have to be effective in how we confront the system, your general election is another example. How are you going to vote? Who are you going to vote for? Are you going to think of me, myself, and I? Me, myself, and my town? Me, myself, my town, my village? Or are you going to think of what's going to impact your neighbor and your neighbor's neighbor? Because if it's going to impact your neighbor, it's going to impact you. It's only a matter of time. So I need us, when we think of collective action, to think outside the box. I wish to God this was something we could nip in the bud overnight in 24 hours so that, yes, we can envisage a just society, a fairer society, a world like Martin Luther King talked about. Martin Luther King said that in the 60s. And those of us that still live today have still not seen the world that he envisaged. But by God's grace, we will get there. The only way we're going to get there is using what the good Lord has given us. And it is okay to be afraid, my brothers and sisters. Fear is a natural emotion. But the point is not to let the fear paralyze you. You need to let the fear kick you upside the butt so you can stand up and speak up in solidarity. You need that fear to make you so angry that you want to do something about it. I don't care if you're crying as you're walking, if you're afraid and shaking as you're walking, as long as you are walking. Because there's no way we can stop what happened to Selma or support Selma and others like Selma if we are all not doing what we have to do. So you want to end racial discrimination? You want us to envisage and execute into reality a just world? Yeah, that's going to take all of us using everything God has given us. Our voices, our votes, our skill set, everything you have to make it happen. And it's not going to be easy. It's going to be hard, but you have to be in it for the long haul. I'm going to stop now.
Thank you, Shola. That was inspirational. I think we haven't been joined by Suresh yet. Is that
Let me give again.
Okay, so let me just move on then to the next steps. It's actually ended quite at the right time as we were supposed to end. But I just want to talk about some of the next steps. I think Andrea has already mentioned some of those, so I will be repeating that. I think there will be a QR code on the screen that is to sign the petition for the CPS to drop these racist charges against Selma, Davinia, and Danae. And I believe that at the last count, we've already had 18,000 signatures. I was looking at that on my WhatsApp, so that's brilliant. Not that they are going to actually drop the charges at all, but at least we are raising awareness, and so that's really good. We also have a crowdfunder, as some of you know. Again, please use the QR code on the screen. I just need to find out whether we are able to show the QR code on the screen or not, because I can't see it at the moment. Okay. Okay, I'm not actually sure that we can show the QR code, but that anyway, there is a crowdfunder. So please find that on social media and donate to the crowdfunder for the legal costs of this case. we switched from GoFundMe to our own site, as our fundraiser with GoFundMe was likely to breach their terms and conditions. But when you do donate, could you please add the reference hashtag King's Cross 3 so we can differentiate it from our other donations. In terms of the trial itself, the dates are the 10th, 11th, and 12th of July. And here we are. We've got both of the QR codes up on the screen. So please scan those. Okay, so we are hoping to mobilize a presence outside Highbury Magistrates Court. That was very effective. In fact, it was so effective that we were seen to be causing disruption, although it was very peaceful and almost joyful and celebratory and showed women power at its best. But of course, the police had to construct it as disruptive. And the other thing I wanted to say was that I have a message from Selma, Denai, and Divinia. They, unfortunately, for legal reasons, they are exercising caution and remaining silent at the moment. It's a silence that is deafening, but they will not be silenced, and they will have much to say when the trial is done. So they're very grateful for your support, as are we at Southall Black Sisters, and our continued fight against the systemic bias against Black women. So I think I want to now kick it open to the floor, open the debate. All right, so at what point do we draw a line within our own movement, so-called anti-racism organizations like Show Racism the Red Card, recruit, prevent, and police officers to their board, and when their own Black staff network raises concerns around this, they find half their members banned from it by the leadership. The trade union movement, including the NEU, knowingly still support SRTRC despite this and more. In fact, Daniel, if you haven't left, this would be a really good question for you to come in with. Okay, I think Daniel may have left. Is there anyone else who would like to pick up on this question?
I can say something. I'm happy to say something. I think there are in the spirit of building coalition, there are points where we have to do the work of kind of cross movement, conscientization, etc., which requires deep patience and understanding. But we also do have to have some boundaries, and I really do feel like we cannot prevent is causing such deep harm, is all I'm going to say. And we do need to be super clear about our engagement with the surveillance state. You know, like we heard, you know, Sukhdev just shared with us the experiences of being surveilled. Like we need to be learning, we need to be taking that stuff seriously. And when the school space is a space of surveillance of children, of their families, like what are we saying here? So I think we need to get some clarity. We need to we all need to settle on like what the hell is our moral compass in like individually and organizationally, right? That's kind of my feeling. I can't comment on the specifics of an organization. I don't know their reality, but I do think we need to keep having the conversation about the problem with structures such as Prevent.
Yeah, I think also a number of organizations feel the pressure to invite police onto their boards or council leaders onto the boards. It's about having a clear politics around this, about not being co-opted by the state. And I think sometimes due to funding pressures, due to a lack of clarity of political goals and so on and so forth, that there are many organizations who do succumb to it. And this happens. I mean, these are questions that come up on a daily basis for any organization, like Southall Black Sisters as well. it's quite hard to steer a clear line, I mean, and to have those sort of clear politics. Sukhdev, would you like to say anything about
It is who do you trust? That is my question. Even if you get involved in different organizations, you don't know what their policies are and what they do.
But you can organize around a set of values and about who are your allies, who you're going to work with, and so on. I suppose that this is where the solidarity question becomes problematic, along with the divisions that there are in our movements. And so how do you express that solidarity across those sorts of differences in politics?
Sorry, are you asking me that question?
It's just
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
a general.
So the thing is, if you go to any organization with me, like I went to the police when my son was missing, and this is the result was, instead of giving me the support, they started spying on me. So if I go to any other organization, I don't know what's going to happen. But for us, from Ricky, I'm talking about the Solidarity from Ricky Real campaign, and we are open. I get hundreds of emails, letters, see people all over, and we do try to help as much as we can. And if we can't help anyone, we have different organizations where we can signpost them to.
Yeah. Okay, this is a question that actually I drafted, so I might as well ask it. To what extent has the turn to the right in global, national, and local politics, as reflected in the rise of populist dictators like Putin, Modi, and Erdogan, with their narrowly defined nationalism based on a hatred of others and patriarchal stereotypes of women, the rise of the right in Europe, which we've talked about a little bit, the US and UK with their anti-immigrant agendas, how far do they set back our struggles against racism and sexism? I think we've got to recognize that we're in a different political moment, perhaps.
Yeah, I'm happy to come in.
Yeah.
Just on that, it's a very scary time, but I don't think, because we are seeing more prominence and legitimacy conferred onto some of these positions. You're seeing these people elected, and that is very scary. But I think there's a long history there of the far right weaponizing or trying to put themselves forward as if they were interested in women's oppression, and that being a vehicle for them to promote their own racist narratives. Obviously, our oppression is not of interest to the far right, and feminism has to be on its guard constantly, and it needs to be really thinking carefully about how narratives can be used, can be weaponized. We're seeing it constantly, in fact, all the time, with supporters, far right supporters co-opting positions and allowing racism to creep in. Where I can't emphasize how much we have to be on our guard. It links back into we're talking about the prevent agenda and that wider weaponization by government of our issues in order to further their own regressive legislation. We're working hard to not let those types of laws be passed in our names, but unfortunately it's a clever tactic of including elements of what could be seen as advancing the rights of women and girls into bits of legislation that overall have a curtailing the rights of us, and are in particular targeting certain groups, those that are most marginalised within that legislation. We see it with the likes of the Nationality and Borders Act. We saw it with the Policing Act that was passed, punitive, hostile laws that curtail the rights of migrant women. And they do find support from certain parts of the women's sector, and it's important for us to constantly be examining what the aggregate harm is that these bits of legislation are doing, or these policies are doing, and where some might say they are speaking to particular women or advancing particular women's positions. So yeah, I think that there's so much that we have to be concerned about. There are no perfect coalitions, I realise that, but when we do come together and we do try and speak in a coordinated way, it should be because we, to borrow in Khan's phrase, actually, we've brought the margins into the centre, and that is what our concern is. That's our preoccupation, because if these things are not working for those that are most marginalised, they are not working for all women, and therefore they're not the business of feminism.
Anybody else? One of the things I wanted to add to that was that one of Tommy Robinson's websites at one point had critiques of forced marriage and honor crimes. The kind of language that was used could have been found on an SBS website, it sounded really progressive and so on. But of course, the agenda underlying that was to damn the barbarism of the Muslims and to send them back because they don't subscribe to our British values and British culture. So it's very insidious the way in which our agendas can be hijacked. So I completely agree with you, Andrea. Shall I move on to the next question?
Can I just say, what's the difference? I mean, maybe I'm getting confused. When my son was attacked, there were two white men who were shouting racist abuse, saying, go back to your own country, or pack this and pack that, yeah? So you sort of say, well, these are ordinary people, racist people who attack people or kill people or whatever. And then you have a force, a Met Police, who have the same, ideas embedded in their brain, like how they perceive Asian people. When you just mentioned about arranged marriage, that was what it was in their mind when we went to say, take a statement, and them saying, Asian people arrange marriages for their children, and that's why your son may have run off. So what's the difference between no racist offenders in the area and then the police officers?
I think it's a failure of accountability at the end of the day, isn't it? I mean, the police force is drawn from the same population. So obviously there will be racism, apart from the institutionalization of racism, there will be racism amongst individual police officers. And to date, they haven't really been held accountable. And that's part of our struggle and campaigns.
It's one of my recommendations at the Stephen Lawrence inquiry was that the police officers should be given training of all cultures. They need to know how culture. Yeah.
I mean, the training has been given forever and a day. But
the training has been given. But if you look at all the cases starting from Stephen Lawrence and even before that, each and every case occurs, and then they go out and sort of say, yes, lessons have been learned. And they said to us as well that we have learned lessons from the Stephen Lawrence case, and the same mistakes will not be repeated, but they were repeated as exactly the same mistakes. So there is a culture, but they don't want to change. You see what I mean? They just carry on. It doesn't matter how much training and what sort of training is given, but they don't want to change. Is it why they want to change? Is it because they find an easy way out? They can abuse people because they have power. They can abuse people and then walk away. And, they never face the consequences because they just resign, really, and still get their pensions.
Yeah, Mara.
Come in. So I want to, I know that, I'm probably the weirdo in the crew, yeah? But, I really understand why strategically we continue to interact with the police. I get it. We have not built infrastructures where we can imagine anything else. I am descended from people that were enslaved. And slavery was absolutely legal for several hundred years. If my ancestors focused on transforming the institution of slavery. Like I wouldn't be here. So there is this thing around which bit of this, that's why I'm saying, like, I get what we have to do strategically. Please let us do what we have to do. 100, I get it. I also am like, I cannot, and I am not willing to put my energy anymore. And I hear what Shole is saying about fighting I personally am not willing to put my energy anymore into a system that is invested in my death. Nicole and Bieber, like, look at what happened. Even in death, their lives, they had no value. Like at some point in time, when Maya Angelou said, when people show you who they are, believe them. At some point in time, like, I'm starting to feel like, hello, what is happening here? They keep telling us, and like, it's like I'm in denial. So I absolutely will support folk doing what they need to do in terms of trying to change. Like, I'm 100 there behind the policy changes. I personally am saying I choose disobedience. I am choosing to not engage anymore in a system that wants to kill me. And that is hard because it means that it's choosing to be randomly radical on the outside, going, hello. But that's how revolution happens. You have those people that are Haitian Revolution, those people that are in there negotiating, whatever, and you've got those people that are like, actually dismantle it. And I am at the place now where I'm like, dismantle it. That's where I am. And I respectfully, like, I respect where everybody else is, but I need to be truthful in this conversation. I can't pretend like I'm invested in this system having some kind of overnight. Like, the right is on the rise. Angela Davis warns us to let's not say that nothing has changed, because what it does is it invalidates all the labor and all that has shifted. And actually, part of why the right is on the rise is because they are scared. That tells us something. That is data for us, right? How are we going to use that? Yeah. The coalition, there has to be coalition between those of us who are taking the kind of position I am and those of you that are still in there trying to change it. Because, like, to be really honest, we are the ones that will hold a particular line while others hold a particular line. That's how we build movement.
Thank you.
But
Sorry.
but I think we all have the power to change the laws. It's not the lawmakers in the parliament that change the law, it's the people on the streets, people who march, people who demand justice, people who do different things and change the laws. And the second thing is, I'm talking about the undercover police inquiry. Obviously, yes, I'm going to court. So my name and, my family's name will be plastered all over the media, all over, on people's names. But the police officers who spied on me, their names will not be mentioned. So how fair is that?
Yeah.
It's a system that's not workable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. If I can just add to that, I think when I was saying there's no perfect coalitions or perfect movements, in fact, like, we are all experiencing this massive injustice. There's none of us that are shielded no matter what we do. I mean, I feel it really strongly. A colleague, a director of a women's sector organisation, doesn't matter what SBS does, what we as individuals do, we're all subjected to the same, or seen in the same way, subjected to the same racist society, the same racist policing. I find it difficult at times to continue to do the accountability work that I feel I have to do because of the women that are in the system that are still turned to the system and expecting it to deliver something for them. And I respect that there is a huge, it's hugely difficult to have the lived experience of racism that you do, and then to be sitting in these rooms and trying to speak to people who are telling you that, yes, they understand they need to change and their cultures need to shift and they need to accept the racism that exists, when you know day to day and you see it playing out constantly, that change is not being felt by anybody. But I persist in taking part in those boards which try and hold the police to account, because I believe that I can play a part or a role in those spaces by confronting them with the reality and the truth. If I wasn't there in some of those spaces, I don't know if that would be being done. So whilst, fellow activists, sisters, people in the movement who want to see this change and this end are doing their work outside of those rooms in the system, I'll continue to do that work where I'm confronting those people with the reality and the truth.
Thank you. And also, there's another reason why we have to continue the engagement with the police, because women who come to us who are escaping violence, violent men, how do we protect them? I mean, it's a terribly flawed way of, bringing justice to those women, allowing them to escape their violence. And very often, if the women go and report it themselves, they don't get the kind of support and assistance that they should until an organization like Southall Black Sisters gets involved. And the way in which we do it is we hold the police accountable on every single case where they fall short of their duty to support the woman in any shape or form, and have a complaint system and try and carry that through. So I think all of this speaks to the next question, which I will read out anyway because somebody has taken the trouble to put it in the chat. So it starts saying solidarity with the King's Cross 3 in their struggle for justice. Agree with everything Marai said and want to ask, when will the women's sector sever its partnership with police? Surely after what has happened to the King's Cross 3, after what happened to Child Q, what happened to Sarah Everard and the thousands of sex workers, migrant women, and domestic and sexual violence survivors who have been preyed upon by police officers, surely it is time to say the system is not reformable. So this is from Sisters Uncut. So I think we have sort of addressed that question. I don't know if anybody wants to add anything more to that.
I just want to say, we all need to support each other and be there for each and every case. And, like I said before, fighting on your own is quite distressing, really. But if we can, attend any meetings or lectures or anywhere else, or just send messages to each other of support, that counts a lot. That gives, I don't want to call myself a victim because I was never a victim. I stood up and fought. Somebody else feeling, going through this, sort of say, well, yes, I have a friend who called me and asked me if I was all right. I'm free. Anybody can contact me. I always return their messages anyway. And I'm on Facebook under Sukde Rio. And whatever is happening to us, it's all on there. Anybody can join in. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so there's a question here about how can someone get involved in our line of work? Somebody who wants to make a difference, is there any advice you can give in terms of volunteering or career-wise?
I think to support some of those things I've raised earlier in the meeting about how you can support this particular action. But I think if you're wanting to do this work for your career, then the women's sector needs people. It needs people with passion who are motivated, who have the vision, values, and skills to support it. We are in a very difficult time with many issues around retention and recruitment in our sector. We are suffering from severe underfunding and a lack of sustainable funding from government. So it does make things difficult, but we do need people who are committed and passionate to the cause of ending violence against women and girls. I would always encourage anyone to consider coming to this sector and contributing it to the work that we do. But also following us. We've got a social media presence so that you can keep yourself informed about different actions, different campaigns that we are running. You can show your support there as well.
Great. Thank you for that. So just to read out some of the comments. Thank you, Marai. Your authenticity and passion is inspiring and much appreciated. The next comment is, I don't know if you know about the young women, Maureen Gitau case, a young woman who was missing and then the body was never found, but through CCTV, a man was charged, but throughout the trial, we were told no crying and no memorial, which caused enough mental well-being, no support from local authority. WAG said couldn't help until the green light was given, no support for the family, work, wouldn't pay the mum, no media coverage. I don't know if anybody's heard about this case. I haven't heard about it. Okay. Next comment is incredibly brave, courageous women, Southall Black Sisters support group. Thank you, Sukhdev. Utmost respect to you, Mrs. Reel. Such strength to speak on such awful treatment and such deep loss. My heart goes out to you. The next question is, can any of the panel perhaps discuss how we can combat the issue that the host community believes that there is no more racism? This is across all platforms, from community groups through to arts groups, and this is part of the racist passive attitude that is experienced daily. Denial.
Mate, like I don't even know how to answer that properly. This thing about we're living in a post-racist society, I'm like, well, maybe you are. Maybe that person is living in a post-racist society. I'm not. I don't know. It depends on how much time you want to spend having that kind of conversation with people who take that position, because there are folk out there doing, like racial justice work all the time, consciousness raising, like out there, like it's, the stuff is happening. Some people, like Rahila said, some people are in denial and some people are like really wanting to stay there, right? And I'm committed to transformation, and also some people I am choosing again disobedience. Like some people I'm just not having the conversation with anymore, because also when we say we are being subjected to the thing, we then are also required to provide the evidence, and the evidence is our pain. The evidence is this thing is happening, and even when we are providing the evidence of our pain and bearing our chest and pointing to the systems and the individual experiences, people are still trying to tell us that's not happening. So it's a really hard one. We have ongoing work to do. This is the labor, 100%. And also, again, that thing from Toni Morrison, the real function of racism is distraction. Sometimes we really have to deeply consider, am I going to put my energy into that conversation at the moment, or am I going to focus on what we need to build together, right? It's always in balance. Some days it's resistance, some days it's proposition and building, right? Like it depends on your energy levels, but like I'm exhausted with it myself.
Okay, there are a few more comments. I'm just reading them as we go along. Funding IDVA services and by and for groups is key to women feeling seen and heard and challenging these serious issues. We need all Vogue services to unionize, to force better pay. Sorry, just lost it. I'm sorry. Yeah, if we do not support the groundwork, which has a huge impact, then we are always at a loss as a movement. Change begins from the root to the branch to the top. Any comeback on that? Okay. Hi, thank you for organizing and facilitating this conversation. I've gained a lot from listening to you all. I would like to ask how you have sustained longevity in proximity to such constantly hostile spaces. I ask as a young person who worries that my generation find hope sort of elusive or fleeting when we can see how slow progress can be? I think that's a difficult question to answer, but what keeps us going, sisters?
Hope.
Dreams of freedom, collective liberation. My
Despite being
accountability.
knocked back.
That's right. My accountability to my ancestors, who, if they gave up, I wouldn't be here. And the dream that one day we will be free. I'm in this till I die, till I take my last breath. And I respect the right of every activist and advocate to work in the ways that feel appropriate to them. You know, like, yeah. Solidarity, community, engaging. That's what keeps me going. Holding difference. Being with you even if I don't agree with you sometimes. That's what holds me.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's it's really true. I think the strength that you can get when you know that you're part of something bigger and that you're not experiencing things alone, and your struggle is not your own struggle, it's everyone's struggle, is really important. That's why the coalition work that we do is so important. We know that we're all playing a part, but others have come before us and have played their part, and many others will come after us and play their part. The goal of ending violence against women and girls is not going to happen immediately, but we can find a way of giving what we can at the points that we can, and then also recognizing that there are times when we have to step back, and there are others who will step forward, and that we'll do that. We'll do that in collaboration with each other, and we'll support each other. And this is an example of how so many people have come together because of this story and want to express their solidarity and their support of Selma and her friends. And it's that gives me hope and encourages me that there is a willingness for us to support each other, to show solidarity, and that can be meaningful. And that can mean that I know has meant a lot to Selma. I know it's meant a lot to Southall Black Sisters and to the wider community of Black women who've experienced similar incidents, similar issues. And so we'll continue to do that, to share our experiences and demonstrate our solidarity and do what we can when we can.
I absolutely second that. That's it's been really heartwarming the way in which the sector has mobilized in support of this issue. It's been wonderful. This question is about Tory-run Nottinghamshire. I've been attending adult education courses via local authority libraries. There is an inflammatory slide on British values stated as rule of law, democracy, etc. Most tutors roll their eyes but say it anyway. I want to challenge this, but I'm so angry I can't speak. Any advice for how to challenge this?
I don't know specifically without the details, but perhaps the person could get in touch with SBS and put more information about their ask.
Mm.
I think basically it's a question about the implicit racism of the superiority of British values versus the values of any of the migrant diaspora communities. I think that's what underlies this thing, that, the idea that democracy is part of the British sense of who they are and British values. So everybody else is excluded from that. I think, in a sense, how do you challenge it? But challenge it, but provide an alternative narrative. I know, for example, Geetha Sehgal used to talk about the fact that some of the UN equality legislation for women was drafted by Indian women, but we never heard about that because it was always seen as something that the West had done. So there are all these sorts of examples, I guess, that one can give in terms of British values and how false that concept is. Okay. Yeah, there's one final question, I think, Well, I think this was actually about the elections. I'm not voting for any mainstream political parties. I shall not be used by these parties just for votes. Election time, they use the black gatekeepers to have black votes. Let us change it. So that's just a comment, I suppose, in response to what Shola was saying. And there are still so few published studies on institutional racism and its impacts on Black women. Without published studies and evidence, we will never force legislative change. Do you think we need to start tackling the politics and structural legislation and evidence the need for change, which is less easy to dismiss? I think we have been doing that. Don't know what people feel.
I think it's been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. People
So-
have sort of challenged it, but who depends on who listens and who changes it.
Yeah.
I think collective solidarity, collective voices can do a lot of good. But I think each and every organization is so busy doing their own work in their own organization that I personally feel that if we all get together and work collectively, we can make changes.
Okay, I think we should end the meeting there. That's a good note to end it on, the fact that we all recognize the importance of collective working, of coming together, of trying to work through difference, and of course, at the same time, setting boundaries. I want to thank all of you who have attended, all of the speakers, and everybody who has turned up at the court. And to remind you that the dates for the court hearing are 10th, 11th, and 12th of July. So we would like to see you all there. We would like to see you give some truth to the allegation that we are being disruptive. Yes, we are being disruptive. Yes, we are drawing attention to the fact that we will no longer put up with this institutionalized racism. I know we are trying to shout it from the rooftops and it's not always successful, but we have to keep going. And we have to acknowledge that there have been some changes, and this is what also keeps us going, apart from the solidarity of each of our groups working together. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.